Emma, Norman, and Ray are three extremely intelligent orphans that share a happy and structured life at the Gracefield house along with 35 other kids. Their day starts off early, with Emma rousing the kids from their sleep and getting everyone ready for breakfast. We see Emma in the house mom role, helping younger kids with their shoelaces and generally caring for the other orphans. At breakfast, we meet Mom Isabella. With black hair, purple eyes, and a warm smile, Isabella tends to the kids with matronly patience and care. The kids all adore and revere her, especially Emma. Following breakfast, the kids are shown demonstrating their intellectual aptitude in a series of tests, which Emma, Norman, and Ray all pass with perfect scores. Despite their impressive intellect, Norman notes that Mom is still far superior as Emma agrees, recounting that they've never been able to beat her in chess. The kids then engage in a game of tag on the large green fields and among the lush trees of the forest that surround Gracefield. Emma is best known for her athletic abilities, and so when Norman is it, he quickly knocks out most of the house with the exception of her. The two square off as Emma makes a daring leap over a crevasse to escape Norman. Just when she thinks she's home free, hiding out in the canopy of a tree, Norman feigns falling over and lures her out. "Your weakness is that you're too kind," he says. The trio summarizes their game of tag, and another round is played where everyone is it except for Norman. He seemingly disappears into the forest, with nobody able to find him until Emma accidentally stumbles upon the outer limits of the forest and notices him gazing at the low-level fence at the border. She tags him, and the other kids eventually catch up with them. There's a discussion of what the outside world must be like, and the kids all take turns dreaming about that fated day when they're adopted and finally leave Gracefield. One of the younger kids, Connie, is actually being adopted that very day. After a day of play and fun, Connie bids a tearful farewell to her Gracefield family and is led away from the house by Isabella. During cleanup, Emma comes across Connie's beloved stuffed animal, Little Bunny. Knowing that she can't possibly make the transition into her new foster home without her dearest friend, she takes Norman and attempts to return the doll to Connie. The pair makes their way to a distant garage of sorts, where a truck lies waiting in the stone corridor. Emma assumes that if she leaves the bunny in the back of the truck that Connie will eventually find it, but when she goes to place it, she discovers a horrific scene. Connie's lifeless, gray body greets her as Emma staggers back in shock. She calls Norman over to confirm, and he's also shaken by the sight of their lifeless former sibling. As they're attempting to make sense of it, they hear voices from another room and immediately go to hide under the truck. Horror begets horror as Emma gets a good look at these figures and discovers that they are honest-to-God monsters. She and Norman both struggle to muffle their screams of terror as the monsters discuss how the kids are being raised as high-quality meat for rich and powerful monsters. Emma wants to know where Mom is and gets her heart-rending answer as a third monster calls on her by name to ensure that the delivery of the high-quality goods goes off without incident. In a matter of moments, Emma and Norman's entire world has been shattered, revealing the terrible truth of their lives. They eventually escape from the corridor, running back to the house as Emma collapses with a mournful scream. That night, she and Norman are discussing what to do next when Norman suggests they should plan on escaping. Emma is reluctant, not wanting to leave the other kids there to die. Norman assures her it comes down to strategy, much like tag and chess. Emma seems to be briefly comforted by the thought, as the episode concludes with Isabella holding Connie's little bunny, seemingly recognizing that someone was sneaking around. Learning the truth of their home has shaken Emma to the core. She has vivid nightmares of Connie being served up as a fancy main course, can barely hide her look of terror upon hearing and seeing Mama for the first time since their discovery. But Norman tells her they have to keep smiling like nothing's wrong. Mama may know someone was at the gate to leave the bunny behind, but she doesn't know who. Or rather, if she does, Emma and Norman are too valuable to kill just for witnessing Connie's processing. During playtime, Emma and Norman agree escaping through the forest is the safest way, but when they cross the short fence they soon encounter a massive, seamless concrete wall. Further complicating matters, when a little tyke is lost all Mama has to do is glance at her watch, and she knows exactly where to find her. So, now they know that security is rather lax because they have some kind of tracking device implanted somewhere in their bodies. Mama seems to make a big show out of wordlessly warning the likes of Norman and Emma. Back at the house, while having a private moment of grief for Connie, Mama suddenly appears before Emma, wondering why she's been less cheerful of late. All Norman can do is watch in horror around the corner as Emma puts on a cheerful front for Mama. Ray ends up bailing them both out when he rings the dinner bell, but as Emma and Norman depart, Mama asks them straight up if they were at the gate the previous night. They cheerfully say of course not, that's against the rules, and continue on, but Mama is definitely suspicious. You could cut the tension in the atmosphere with a knife. Once they're alone again, neither can hold in their sheer terror anymore. Emma even collapses to her knees, but Norman helps her up with a trembling hand, and Emma sees she's not alone and all hope isn't lost. They're going to get out of here. They just need a plan. That plan involves stashing a bunch of table linen in a tree hollow near the wall that they'll use to make rope when the time comes to escape. Norman figures they have 2 months left before the next child is taken. But someone followed them out to the wall. Fortunately for them, it's their friend Ray, who wants to know what's up. They tell him, and to their amazement, he believes it all without a hint of incredulity, because he knows Norman well enough to know he'd never lie about something like this, Emma being a different story. While Ray is willing to lend his not inconsiderable intellect to the big escape plan, he has a big problem with Emma's insistence that all 37 children will be escaping. He brings up the virtual impossibility of getting everyone away from Mama and off the farm without serious or even total casualties, and something I didn't consider. Beyond that wall, it's a demon's world, not for humans. Escaping is just the first step. The young, small, and weak will have to be left behind to ensure any chance of the survival of the older, bigger, and stronger. But Ray's way isn't going to work with Emma. She doesn't care if it's impossible. Everyone is being saved, and that's that. It may be foolhardy, but Norman is with her. When Ray asks why in his otherwise right mind he'd go along with Emma's mudboat, Norman explains simply that he likes Emma and wants her to keep smiling no matter what, and that if dried and hardened it's possible for a mudboat to float. Isabella is already well known by her new assistant, Sister Crone, not only for being the youngest mama of a plant, for consistently producing the finest product available, but she's no doe-eyed acolyte eager to learn Isabella's ways. Her very first night there, Crone is already planning to usurp her boss, who gave her all the ammo she'll need. Isabella isn't reporting the 2 children who witnessed a harvest. That could get her fired or worse if the bigwigs find out. Meanwhile, Emma, Norman, and Ray have just one more difficult variable to consider during their preparations for what's already looking like a hopeless escape plan. When told to think like the enemy and finding a place where a tracking device could be implanted, she inspects Carol, the newest addition to the farm, and finds a red bump behind her ear. I probably could have done without the demon business meeting complete with some kind of steaming brew but no donuts, as it kinda detracts from their mystique. But at the same time, despite their frightful appearance, these monsters carry on pretty banal lives, with the lower classes of demons serving the upper classes. Perhaps the kids could exploit the inherent discord within such a strict caste system, but first things first, all the logistics required to get everyone off the farm safely. They agree that it's too risky to attempt to destroy their ear trackers lest they trip an alarm, so they focus on getting everyone out first. They know many of the kids will either be too young to understand or old enough not to believe a word of what they're saying. Everybody loves Mama after all. The trio decide to disguise the escape as a harmless game of tag. Emma sets to work improving the kids' physical condition, while Norman and Ray coach them up on the proper way to survive. Tag. Unfortunately, their subterfuge doesn't fool Sister Crone for 1 second. She's suspicious of the 3 to start, and unlike Isabella intends to ship them out sooner than their official ship date so she can snitch on Isabella for breaking protocol and grab power. Crone is also physically superior to all of the kids, being an adult in pretty good shape. She challenges the kids to a game of tag, betting she can capture them all in 20 minutes. She lures most of the younger kids out of their hiding spots by making cute cutout shapes and leaves. Once she's spotted Emma, it's only a matter of exhausting her and forcing her to find a hiding spot. It's a place where there are only so many such spots, and Emma has the disadvantage of having tried to run with 2 young ones in her arms. The moment when Crone's voice suddenly grows louder and clearer as she suddenly looms over Emma was, well, pretty frightening. Norman manages to give Crone the slip, and Ray is the one to announce that her time is up. She's impressed by the trio of troublemakers, but only insofar as she's impressed by prime livestock. Now that she knows the actors, their strengths and weaknesses, and that there's more to their tag than mere play, she'll be keeping that much closer an eye on them. Not to mention she'll have an extra set of eyes in the form of a traitor in Gilda. When Norman and Ray put the pieces together to determine there's such a traitor among them, you can see Emma's spirits plummet. All this time, she's thinking of getting everyone out of the farm to spare them the stuff of nightmares, but the adults already have at least 1 kid, and it could be anyone. working against her efforts, as well as that kid's own interests. If there was any doubt that Isabella also considers this a game of chess against the smartest of her stock, she makes sure Sister Crone understands that her role doesn't extend beyond that of her pawn. Informing her that she's well aware of her behind-the-back plotting, Isabella promises Crone that if she cooperates, she'll be a mama of her own. Predictably, Crone privately fumes and resolves to unseat Isabella rather than wait to be promoted. No doubt Isabella knows she could still be betrayed. Meanwhile, Emma, Norman, and Ray continue their escape practice thinly disguised as a game of tag. Only this time in teams led by older kids rather than everyone on their own. There's a lot of attention paid to the hierarchy of the teams and the patterns of their movement. Ray insists Emma memorize all 100 formations he's devised, and while Emma seems initially reluctant, she responds with easy peasy. Because it most certainly will be easy peasy compared to escaping the farm for real. It's not lost on the trio that there's a traitor in their midst, and they've already cast most of their suspicions on Gilda and Dawn. When Ray tells Emma to go against her kinder nature and suspect them, it isn't long before everything they do looks suspicious to her. How will the escape ever succeed if they can't trust everyone escaping? It's for this reason that Norman uses one card only they can play, the element of surprise, not in that they're escaping, but when. With the pattern of the schedule, Mama has basically dared them to use all of the month plus they have left until the next shipment. But Norman knows they can't go by the schedule they've been handed. They have to escape sooner, much sooner, in just 10 days. To achieve that, they need to start filling in the other older kids, starting with Gilda and Dawn. The POV animation of the three slowly climbing the stairs to the library really transported me into their shoes and added to the tension and stress with each creaky footstep. At first, Dawn thinks it's a big joke, but Gilda knows Emma well enough to know she'd never joke or lie about such things. Norman lies that the kids who left were victims of human trafficking, since the cold reality might just be too much. Gilda and Dawn ultimately both agree that an escape attempt is the only choice. Ray doesn't like how Norman left out the truth to Gilda and Dawn about all the kids dying and being eaten, but for Norman, the escape must come first. He'll deal with the backlash from bending the truth once that objective has been completed. He's also set traps for Gilda and Dawn by giving them different locations for their escape rope. That night, Emma pretends to sleep and watches Gilda sneak out of the bedroom. What Emma can't see through the door is that someone I initially believed to be Gilda slips a piece of paper under Isabella's door with the location of the rope, under Norman's bed. It must be noted that Norman told Ray that he'd tell Dawn it was under the bed, not Gilda. After the paper is delivered, Gilda visits Crone's room, and Emma listens in from behind that door. Things get a little tense in there, with evidence wavering between Gilda being Crone's informant and not, but in the end, Gilda does what Emma hoped for and refuses to give up any information. The next day, Norman wonders out loud why someone would betray their family. Ray tells him there must be some kind of incentive, like being promised they'll be allowed to live and grow up to become an adult. Later, Norman asks Emma if she'd let the traitor escape with them even if they betrayed them. Emma predictably and quickly answers that of course, she would. She wouldn't consider the traitor a bad person, because none of them are bad people. Again, Emma proves she's the emotional and moral heart of the show. But when Norman and Ray search the two spots where the rope was hidden, Norman says there's nothing under the bed, and Ray says that must mean Dawn is the traitor. Only now Norman is convinced that Ray has been the real traitor all along. There's certainly already a wealth of evidence to support that, but we'll see if Norman's right, and if so, how Ray will explain himself. Until then, things just got a lot more complicated.